Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could change the football landscape in the very near future. And that statement may have never been more true on this podcast, because today, not only are we going to look at some of those transfer portal maneuvers, who's going where, what we think about some other rumors that we've seen, but also I'm going to give you a hot or a cold on a scale of 1 to 5 on 4 different prospects that have declared themselves to be eligible for the NFL draft. So before we get into any of that, make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you like the video. Helps me out a ton, doesn't cost you anything, just helps me grow the channel. Okay, so the first one we want to look at is maybe not the most notable thing we're going to cover today, but certainly one that kind of baffles me the more I look at it. The fact that Wisconsin landed Nick Evers makes perfect sense. You know, Luke Fickell needed a quarterback. Graham Mertz is leaving. Probably wasn't the guy he was going to go with anyways. But they get Nick Evers in, who was a four-star, initially recruited and committed to Oklahoma. And the more that's rolled out about this kid has made it just all the more baffling that he wasn't on the roster to begin with for the Badgers. So he has family that went to UW. I believe he has family that lives in Madison. He called Madison his home away from home. Just all these different little things that, you know, make it pretty obvious that he should have been recruited to Wisconsin coming out of the gate. But guess what? They didn't offer him. He did not get an offer from the University of Wisconsin. So Luke Fickell slips in there and takes him into where he likely should have been headed initially coming out of high school. I mentioned last episode that a pairing of Braylon Allen, who is returning to the Badgers, and a really quality quarterback would be just something special, something that could truly lift Wisconsin up to this standard that they think they can be, in this place that they think they really should be very soon. I think that could be achieved by that. Now, we haven't seen a lot of Evers this year. He threw exactly one pass, and it was an incompletion. So I can't bank on him too much right now. But he has some name value. He was a valued recruit. He's now been in the college cycle, so he understands kind of how that routine looks. You're not really worried too much about immaturity, maybe on the football field, but not off of it, because it seems like he passed all the other tests with flying colors. And, I mean, look at his cycle that he had whenever he was coming out. He had offers from OU, obviously, Florida, Auburn, and funnily enough, Luke Fickell offered him whenever he was at Cincinnati. So he gets the guy he wants before. Now we've just got to see if it works. Overall, I'm pretty excited about this one. I think it's going to work out well for the University of Wisconsin. I think he could be the guy. And if he's not, you've still got next year's portal, and you've got kids that you can bring in. Overall, you don't have to overcommit to this kid. He's the first-year quarterback at Wisconsin under Luke Fickell. So you don't have to overinvest in him. But he's got a little bit of value to him, something that could at least make things interesting and entertaining if it does pan out. If you've been following this podcast for a while, you'll know that I'm pretty high on Luke Fickell. I like his style of coaching. I like what he brings to the table. Somebody I'm not quite as high on, and I'm also high on Wisconsin making a big jump with Fickell at the helm. But a coach that's pretty revered around college football, I don't really fall in line with much. That is Lincoln Riley at USC. I do think he is a bit overrated, but he's got currently the Heisman winner from this previous year, Caleb Williams, and he's going to need help to potentially repeat, because he can't even go to the draft until next year. Now, you're probably going to lose Jordan Addison to the draft. That's just the realistic outlook to have on this, but don't worry, because they just got a new receiver who had 1,100 yards in the Pac-12 to come over and help out him in that case to push forward and potentially grab two back-to-back. Now let's talk a little bit about Dorian Singer. So he was at Arizona last year, and like I mentioned, had 1,100 yards in the Pac-12 last season. So he knows this style of ball, he knows the teams they're playing, and now instead of being a Wildcat, he's going to move up a little bit north and become a Trojan. Now, I do think this is a really big win for Lincoln Riley and his staff, mostly because last year he had a bit of a layup in the transfer portal. He had all his OU kids he could pull over. They were kind of the bright and shiny new object because he was such a big hire, but now they don't really have all of those assets and all of that benefit to help them in this portal. So what they do, they went out and started off pretty quick. It seems like he's going to adjust just fine to not being, you know, the guy to look at right now, because you've got Dion, you've got Fickell, you've got Rule, you've got, you know, a couple different hires coming into place that, you know, kind of draw some of that shine off of USC rather, purely because everybody's going to pay attention to what's new It's easy to do that. It's easy to get caught up in the Deion wave. It's easy to get caught up in Fickell moving out to Wisconsin. But overall, Lincoln Riley doesn't seem to really be struggling to taking a back seat in this portal, if you want to look at it that way. Caleb Williams, like I mentioned, he has another chance, or he has a chance rather, to go back to back, and he's got another weapon that can absolutely help him out in that case. It's going to be really fun to see if Dorian Singer can make that transfer and make it well, and step into maybe wide receiver role or bounce down to wide receiver 2, but either way, still play a vital portion in this offense, and that's something we'll have to wait and see how it unfolds over time. Hoping for the kid, though. You never want to see a portal transfer in badly, and Singer seems like he's got all the talent in the world, so kudos to you. Hopefully you'll make it work out there in SoCal. Okay, so the next one I want to look at, we're going to the SEC next, because a quarterback has landed in the University of Kentucky. Will Levis is moving on, so they've called up Devin Leary to become their next quarterback. They landed him. He entered the portal from NC State, which was a bit of a shock to me, but he will now be a Wildcat in the SEC. So the thing I find interesting about this, obviously Will Levis leaving leaves a rather large hole in Kentucky's offense, because he was kind of what would be the focal point, even though Chris Rodriguez kind of took that from him in a lot of different instances. It means that you need a new signal caller. They very clearly didn't feel like they had their guy on the roster already, so they went out and got somebody with a lot of experience. Personally, I think that this was probably the highest Kentucky could shoot and feasibly land the target, because Leary, very talented quarterback, somebody I've given quite a bit of praise to this season. I don't think that they were really in contention of getting DJU. I don't really lean towards Grayson McCall being super interested in that. I think he'd have better offers as well. So Devin Leary, a guy that I would have qualified as a top 5 quarterback in the portal, is coming over to Kentucky, and like I mentioned, brings a lot of experience to the table. I think he might even be an upgrade stats-wise to Levis. I mean, granted, Levis's whole selling point was his athletic ability and what he brought to the table as an athlete, and some of that grit that he brought to him. But Leary has a lot more composure, I would say, a lot more ability to kind of roll through the tide and manage these different changing aspects, and he's going to be a lot more consistent for you. Levis struggled mightily with consistency. One week he'd have 150 yards, next week he'd have 300, but with Leary, you should know what you're getting on a weekly basis, as opposed to what you had with Levis. So I think overall, probably qualified as a net neutral for them. I think they got a really good quarterback who should be able to lead the team pretty well. Granted, you're losing the upside, but that upside really never came to fruition while he was at Kentucky. So maybe it is even a positive that Leary is in now that Levis will be leaving. So something I didn't expect to become anything really was Travis Hunter leaving Jackson State. We all knew that was happening. Deion's been saying as much in just about every press conference. Anytime there's a live mic in front of him, he likes to tell us that Travis Hunter is coming with him very soon. But that might not be the case, because we're hearing a lot recently about Travis Hunter having conversations with big schools, namely Georgia. Georgia seems to be super in on Travis Hunter right now. Said that I saw a report earlier today even that he's had multiple conversations with head coach Kirby Smart and other Georgia staffers. So it's not even just Kirby rather, checking in with him and being like, hey, I know you've got a pretty nice bond with Deion, but what do you think about maybe coming over here and staying a little bit closer to where you're at currently? It's interesting, at least, because obviously if you want NFL prosperity and you want the ability to go pro, it's hard to go against Georgia as your option, especially when you're a player like Travis Hunter, who has skill on both sides of the ball and could still be used on both sides of the ball in Division I Power 5 football. So it's going to be interesting to see if these rumors continue to build and build and build, which I think they will, but until I have a reason to believe that Deion Sanders has lost the faith of Travis Hunter, or until I see Travis Hunter in a Georgia uniform saying, I'm committed, go Dogs, all that stuff, I'm going to lean with the fact that he's probably sticking around with Deion going to Colorado, mostly because I don't think Deion, at this point, would be as confident as he is that he's landing Travis Hunter if he wasn't actually landing Travis Hunter. That's a big guy to assume that you've got and not feel really good about having him before you say anything about it. So with me personally, I'm going to lean with him actually going to Colorado. I think he'll be with Shader and Shiloh in Colorado, with Dion in Colorado. I think he will become a piece of that offense, mostly because a large part of what I would imagine he needs to be sold to go to whatever university he's going to go to, especially if it's not with Dion, is that he will get to play both sides of the ball, because that could make him truly different and truly special as a recruit. Imagine if we have a wide receiver slash cornerback in a year or two in the draft, and people are like, okay, well, typically valued O-line for one or the other. You don't really see receivers go number one, and you don't really see corners go number one, especially not anymore. But if he has that opportunity to show that he can be both, he might be drafted as both, which could be truly special to see. So if Georgia can offer him that, don't be totally shocked if he starts looking that way. Me personally, I'm going to say that he sticks with Colorado. Okay, so those are the four big rumors that I wanted to talk about within college football, where rumor slash landing spots in the case of Leary and some of those other instances. But now I want to look at the guys who maybe are leaving spots open for some of these potential rumors that I'll be addressing in the future, because I've got four names that really stood out to me as to the guys that are declaring for the NFL draft, and guys that I want to talk about and really give you a gauge on how I'm feeling with them. The first one I want to talk about, Max Duggan from TCU. He has officially put his name in the hat. He's going to the NFL draft. I've got this one at a pretty even 3 out of 5 for my hot or cold meter. Kind of lukewarm, if you want to put it that way. So I don't think Duggan will ever reach the true first round talk. I think he's a little bit too late in his game. I think that this year was truly special for him, and I think he's got the talents to potentially make some noise in the NFL if he is ever to be given that opportunity. But overall, I don't think with age, with size, with some of his measurables, he's probably not ever going to be looked at in the draft space as a true first round caliber quarterback, just because he doesn't have that ability to improve to where you want your NFL quarterbacks to be. That said, I think collegiate glory probably could have been more fruitful for him. I think going back to TCU, being their quarterback again, helping Sonny Dykes make year two not a sophomore slump, if you will, I think that could have been really nice. I think they could have a pretty solid chance of running the table again in the Big 12, maybe get that Kansas State off your back and put that to bed. But overall, I think that could have made more sense for him, especially with NIL being a Heisman candidate. He could make pretty similar numbers to what his rookie contract could feasibly be. Let's say he goes in the third round. That's kind of where I've got his numbers right now. I don't know that his stock will ever get higher than a third round pick, but he's got to find the balance somewhere, right? He's got to find where his potential is still possibly there, where he's still young enough to not be looked at like Hendon Hooker or, some of these other guys who have been a little bit too old to truly get the value they want and the value that sometimes you see on the football field from them. He's got to find the balance there. He's got to find where the sweet spot is, and maybe it is this year. I'm not going to pretend like if he came back next year, he could be a first-round pick, because I don't know. I mean, we've seen Joe Burrow become the first overall pick, and I think he was 24 when he was drafted. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I just don't think that was in the cards for Max Duggan. So, he could get more money from the pros feasibly. Depends on where he's drafted, honestly. More longevity with that, because 1 year of that much money is a lot different than 4 years with that much money. I think that goes without saying. Ultimately, I think this could be the better move for him. That's why I slightly lean 3 out of 5. But I do see a lot of the advantages he could have had he stayed at TCU. So I kind of play the fence here. And, there's another quarterback that has a lot to do with landing spot. Maybe you can say the same about Max Duggan here. But overall, mine is more based on who he is and where he can feasibly go from this point forward, athletically and as a football player. Okay, so the next one, we're going to switch sides of the ball completely. We've got 3 offense, 1 defense, but I'm going to go ahead and do the defensive player now, because Devin Witherspoon from Illinois had an incredible year for Illinois, the Fighting Illini, and he has decided he's moving on. This one is the very top of the hot or cold. He is a 5 out of 5, scorching hot, correct decision to make, in my opinion, for Devin Witherspoon. So look at the general composition of Illinois and what made them so good this year, and you won't get very far beyond their defensive coordinator, who really did help put this unit together. And Ryan Walters, while he was really good as a defensive coordinator for Illinois, he's no longer going to be there. Walters will next season be the head coach for Purdue. So a big cog in what made Witherspoon great and help him break out, their defensive coordinator will no longer be with the team. That's an easy thing to notice quick and be like, okay, that helps, because going through a new defensive coordinator, potentially having to change scheme and how you operate and what you need to work on, could tank your draft stock. It's very hard to build up a credible stock in, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So one bad year could knock him off the map completely. So I get going and, making yourself available for the NFL, because this might be, the pinnacle of where you could feasibly be in your draft stock. So again, he did really well for himself. He earned an All-American nod, and he got the Tatum Woodson Award, which is best defensive back in the country. So, he's carved out quite the name for himself. Very understandable as to why he would be going to the NFL. And overall, I think he's going to end up a first-round pick. Whenever you look at his tape, when you look at what he brings to the table, I think it's going to be easy to sell yourself on drafting Devin Witherspoon if you need corner help. It was a good year for him, one that likely pays off well for him down the stretch. The money he's going to make now relative to what he could have made last year, if he came out or whatever, and potentially what he could make next year, it's going to end up being probably the maximum he could have made with a defensive coordinator swap. Granted, if he would have followed Walters to Purdue, maybe, but even then that worries you, because Walters is going down to a lower level, at least team-wise. Purdue is not on the same caliber as Illinois, at least in my opinion. But overall, I think it's going to end up well for him, which is why I have him at the top of the top for the hot or cold. And we stay with that with a 5 out of 5. Also, we stay in orange jerseys because Jalen Hyatt is leaving Tennessee, and this one just made too much sense. 5 out of 5 again, because, not only is he losing Hendon Hooker, but he's also got a similar thing going on to Witherspoon. He is losing his offensive coordinator, who is leaving to be a head coach elsewhere. So that's another important piece that is no longer going to be with him. When you no longer have the offensive coordinator that helped design the scheme that got you really on the map, and then you don't have the quarterback that helped in that regard as well, it's a pretty easy decision to make. I don't think there was really any part of Jalen Hyatt that would have made sense to stay and just try to risk whatever they're going to do at quarterback for Tennessee, be that Joe Milton, be that addressing the portal, give Grayson McCall a ring. I think that'll probably pay off really well. I think that'd be a really fun experiment as well. But overall, I don't think you risk it, just for the simple fact that I don't know that Hyatt gets any higher than where he's currently at. I think that he's probably at the peak of his placement as well. So, you're maximizing your funds and maximizing your potential here. And following an incredible season, I think an NFL team is going to put him to really good use next year, and I can't wait to see who ends up landing him. Because teams always need good receivers and good players on their roster. You can never have too many good receivers. So Hyatt should earn a pretty solid spot, probably wide receiver 3 on a pretty solid team is where I'm going to project. So I think we'll be seeing him plenty on Sundays moving forward, as he probably should be moving away from Saturdays. And then the final one I want to talk about, the reason I wore the Florida Gators shirt today, Anthony Richardson, AR-15, formerly known as, I believe at the beginning of the season he wanted to disassociate from that nickname due to gun crime and things of that nature. But he is declared for the NFL draft, and this one is by far the coldest one I have on this list, 1.5 out of 5. I have seen a lot of the rumblings about, I believe it was McShay, maybe, that had said he doesn't think he's ready, that he probably needed another year in college, and I don't disagree with that sentiment, because when you looked at Anthony Richardson and you truly sat down and watched him play, you had a lot to worry about, especially as a passer. On the ground, he's dynamite. He is all of the way there. Offers a lot of the same qualities that maybe Malik Willis did on the ground. What we're seeing from Justin Fields, I think Anthony Richardson's capable of that on the ground, but overall, as a passer, what you really need to have in this league is not there. So he's going to need to go somewhere that is willing to sit him and wait a little bit before we see him, before we truly, can enjoy or value the pick, because he is quite a ways away from where he needs to be. So, he was Florida's offense last year, right? And I can't take that away from him. I'd mentioned that in in the last episode I did, actually, because I talked about the not Fenway Bowl. It was whenever Florida played Oregon State. I had mentioned that Anthony Richardson not being there meant their offense wasn't there, and they were going to have to, find a new identity in the final game of their season. I don't know, man. It's a dangerous game to play with quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson, like Will Levis. These guys, we were seeing a lot of this buzz, and granted, I don't think it'll stick around, but Phil Yurkovich from Boston College, the guys who aren't polished but have this immense amount of talent that it's hard to ignore them. Like Anthony Richardson, if he goes to the combine, I could see him running like a high 4.3, because he's just that quick. He might even run lower than that. He's a special talent as far as his skill set goes and what he is capable of putting on the football field. But as to what it is right now, you can't feel just super great about drafting him super high. Like, you almost need him to go to a team that has the pieces around him, has a guy that they trust enough to at least start for, half the season or however long you want to put his timetable, and, let things function and let him come along as he can, more so than forcing him into a spot like Bryce Young potentially could be. I think that my 1.5 out of 5 for him could change a lot, both negatively and positively. It could drop all the way down sub 1, and, get down to that 0.5 range if he goes to a team like Carolina, or a team, that's just really not built to win at this current juncture. But if he goes to Tampa, if he goes to Indianapolis, who I do still think has a really good roster, it's just they can't figure out quarterback. If he has these pieces around him and the right guys in the building that can help teach him how to grow and how to be a better football player, this number could legitimately skyrocket. Like, when the NFL draft gets here, I'll be doing grades for each team and kind of figuring out what I like, what I don't like from each class. If he lands somewhere that's going to give him a position to succeed and sit down and learn, this grade could jump. He could end up being an A grade for me in the draft. He's that talented. He just needs the window and the time to develop that talent into something a little more tangible, if you will. So what do you think about those grades? Do you have any more transfer rumors or transfer finalities that you want to talk about? Get in the comment section. Get in my Twitter account. I'll leave the Twitter accounts in the little section below here, and then we'll have obviously the comment section, where those are located. But now, that is episode 55 of the From My Prospective podcast, and as always, I'll see you next time.